Now for global business updates, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, all our viewers. Great interview on the electricity sector, and thank you so much for just hammering the issue of subsidies that are a burden on the country. All right, we'll start with Chevron. Chevron saying that this is the global oil and gas station in the United States. They are going to take an impairment charge of about $3.5 to $4 billion. This is on some assets that they sold in the United States. I think one of the companies that they sold to, Friedland, if I remember correctly, they went bankrupt, and it looks like Chevron has to pay for them. Also, California, which of course is going green, is limiting the amount of permits that it's giving to oil and gas companies for drilling and so on and so forth. I think they produce about 75,000 barrels in Central California, and they said that, look, California's policies are costing us a whole lot of money. So that's for Chevron. We move to Barclays. We saw stocks to open up the new year in the United States dropping, particularly tech stocks. They downgraded Apple, saying that they have a dim view of demand for future iPhones. If you look at what a quote from the analysts at Barclays, they're essentially saying that they don't see much coming in the pipeline in the future. It says our checks remain negative on volumes and the mix for the iPhone 15. We see no features or upgrades that are likely to make the iPhone 16 more compelling. The argument against this is that Apple, a lot of its revenues are being supported by its services, so Apple TV and these other things that it's bringing up, and so that might be able to augment. But still, main revenues come from the iPhone. We move from there to Tesla. Tesla, we're talking about Tesla's numbers. They hadn't come out at the time we're discussing BYD, but they did actually release them, and Tesla has lost its title of the world's largest electric vehicle maker to BYD. Q4 sales came in at 484,000, ahead of analyst estimates, 20% growth, but you can see that BYD in the fourth quarter did 526,000. Full year BYD did over 3 million, Tesla did about 1.8, although it was higher than the 1.3 that they did in 2022. We move to fashion, some fashion news here. Prada is expanding into the Philippines. So they're calling it Prada Philippines. It's a joint venture with SSI Group. SSI Group is through their subsidiary called Stores Special. You can see the amount of money, an initial investment of 748 million. I think SSI is going to bring in about 300 million of that. Prada is going to bring in the balance. At completion, to expand their footprint across the Philippines, another 6.8 billion between the two companies is going to be spent, and Prada is going to own about 60% of that. If you take a look at a quote from the statement that they put out in terms of justifying, it says the joint venture is expected to accelerate the growth of the Prada brand in the Philippines and enable operating efficiencies as SSI and Prada transition from a franchisor relationship to joint venture partners, which means maybe SSI will get more of a stake as things move on. Now, if you look at and I thought this was very interesting in terms of the portfolio of the SSI Group. I mean, this is top of the line fashion brands. They've got Balenciaga, Boss, Bottega Veneta, Cartier, Loewe, and Alexander McQueen. And I was like, okay, what is because the doctor's words always ring in my head. What's the lesson for Nigeria? I was like, what is the attraction of the economy of the Philippines? How many wealthy people do they have there that are spending money? So I just, quick comparison, at least between the Philippines and Nigeria. Population-wise, they are 113 million. We are 190 to 200. We're bigger, so they have as of 2022, a 404 billion economy. Nigeria, according to the World Bank, was pegged at 472. But then that's where the Nigeria ends, and then Philippines just takes over. 2022 GDP growth, 7.6% for the Philippines. Nigeria is at 3.1. Per capita, 3,498. The government wants to actually increase it. You look at their inflation, average inflation 5.8%. We're at 18.76 for this average for 2022. Their exchange rate, the Philippine peso, is at 55 to the dollar, while we closed yesterday about 9.88. Now, unemployment, they are still lower, 4.3. Remember, we revised ours to 5.3%, right? So Philippines, between, I think, 2010 to 2019 has averaged about 6.4, 6.5% growth. So it's been pretty robust. And so, for a $6 billion investment to come from one of the biggest luxury luxury brands in the world tells you about the purchasing power and other metrics of the nation. To Nigeria, you've talked extensively, you all, about the security situation, looking at the cover of today's This Day newspaper about David Mark, talking about Nigeria's security acquisition. And interestingly enough, we had the president of the LCCI, Mr. Idahosa, and talking about, he was responding to the president's New Year chat, but the conversation ended up, dovetailing into security. I was asking about the budgets of the states and whether or not they can handle state police. Here's what he said. Chamber of Commerce and Industry has issued a statement following President Tinubu's New Year's address. If we can take a look at the highlights from the president's address to the nation, it wants to improve electricity supply, simplify tax laws, improve the business environment. All right, unfortunately, we don't have that clip. But either way, he said that Nigeria's spending priorities in terms of the National Assembly, the Senate, and so on and so forth, they come to question when you say you cannot afford, state police. If you look at what has been allocated to other line items in our budget, that's basically what he said. But on security, I wanted to ask the three of you, what did we get for the last 8 years in terms of where the last presidents who campaigned on ending insecurity and corruption, where are we? Okay. Where are we? Right? I'm almost wrapping up. And then on revenues, you had another great interview with the former governor of Ogun State, which I wanted to compare and contrast two things. Mr. Former Governor Oshoba, where he said when the treasury was empty and the last administration was borrowing to pay salaries, the whole place was empty. What else can you do other than, in the meantime, borrowing to fill the gap? I'm going to contrast that with what Wale Edun said at the signing of the budget, where he said that Nigeria is going to be depending more on revenues than borrowing, although he said to put the two side by side. In terms of, remember, they're looking at what? Is it 16 trillion? We did about 7-8 last year. Where is the money going to come from? And if you're going to sell assets or a stake in state-owned enterprises, it's a big question for Nigeria as far as a quest for revenues. Okay,
so you asked us what did Buhari give us security legacy? I'll answer in one word: I assure you. That was it.
I get where you're going with that.
3 words. Yeah. I assure you. Yeah. That's it. Because he kept on giving assurances and nothing happened. Yeah. In fact, things worsened off. You heard the report by the group, I think the Southern Middle Belt Forum, that was talking about ethnicism being rife under his administration. It was under him we had a lot of ethnic contention and matters over land like Ruga and things like that. When he came in initially, he said, oh, they had decimated Boko Haram. Most of the parts Boko Haram was, they were flying their flag. They couldn't be there any longer. But it was under him we had the surge of banditry. It was under him they killed Shekau how many times? He would say he made some grounds, but a lot of people died under him. And that's why we need a holistic approach. At first, the economy of insecurity. Probably you should do a documentary on that. The economy of insecurity. And afterwards, how we can solve that. Concerning the Philippines, truth has to be said, you can see economic growth, but also it's about leadership. When Duterte was there, it was something else. But at least there's a new lease of life in the Philippines, and you can see that growth. And that growth is coming across most parts of the East. And that's why you see that people like Prada are putting some money in there to be able to say, okay, we have a fast-growing middle class that can cash in on our products and all of that. For Tesla, I think it's sad reality. I think this will wake up Elon Musk. He talks too much. Rather, I'll have thought he should focus on the productivity of Tesla. Because you see, why Tesla sales is low is not because people are not making requests. It's because how they cannot meet the demands due to their own internal crisis and problems in the market. And you can see the Chinese, you can blame them for all you want and say, oh, labor is cheap and all of that. But they meet the demand of the market and they churn it out real quickly. And that's why BYD is in the market. So whatever you see as regards, protectionism and all of that, I think Elon Musk too should also be able to do the work. And once China goes up, they don't stop. And it's going to be a mass competition market because that's the future of motoring. In fact, it was the past of motoring because the first cars made were electric cars. That's true. It was because of the manipulation of the market with the likes of Standard Oil. That's how they deliberately subjugated the electrical industries in the early 1900s so that Rockefeller can sell his own oil, and that's why petrol cars took front shape. We should never forget that historical antecedent. So it's a resurgence, really.
Just two things on security. Absolutely correct in terms of the last administration despite the many successes they said they recorded, especially, I mean, I must give kudos, especially in Borno State, Maiduguri, they tried to, as much as possible, restore life back. But when terrorism in the northeast seemed to have been contained to a large extent, then other forms of insecurity across the nation, so would give them a fail, you know, in terms of the last administration. But this administration knew the insecurity challenges before coming into office. So they cannot use that as an excuse that, oh, insecurity was terrible during the Buhari administration. And then yesterday, I keep focusing on what Boston said yesterday in terms of when you sit at the table with security chiefs, have economists in there as well, have Minister of Finance and Coordinator of the Economy there as well, Coordinating Minister of the Economy there as well, because there are other triggers beyond just, oh, it's a crime. There are other economic activities that ought to be stimulated, especially when security is handled. I was going to touch very quickly on the Apple shares, and also the fact that it's quite worrying. 3.6% down, 7 weeks, the lowest in 7 weeks. But in terms of the outlook on the new products that are coming on board, iPhone 15, not really great. iPhone 16, they said it's looking to be lackluster as well. And just the future of Apple, and perhaps is there a need for a change in leadership? Tim Cook has held helms of affairs, and people have been not quite enthusiastic with regards to the kind of products, saying it's just recycling of the same thing with little features change here and there. So maybe they need to rethink in terms of strategy and even perhaps leadership in the long run.
Good point, good point. Look, Apple shares have been worrying analysts and investors since last October. And the concern is about how it's going to play out. And what the Barclays Group has done now is to downgrade Apple shares by about 4%, what they call underweight. In terms of prices, yes, they reduced it from $160, well, from $161 to $160. But the question to ask about the performance of iPhone 15 and whose sales may affect iPhone 16 is that, does this have anything to do without projection, without claim earlier on that the Chinese government had told its officials to stop using Apple phones, yeah. Although the Chinese government, you know, denied that, yeah. But that is the truth. Now, as for Tesla, in fact, exceeded its own expectations. The projection by Tesla executives was that they will be able to do a total of 1.8 million. And they ended up doing, you know, a little above 1.8 million. A growth in terms of sales year on year of 38%. But the reality, however, is that BYD is far ahead with over 3 million in terms of sales. So what we see here is about the BYD strength and the competitive nature of the Chinese EV makers bullying their way even into Europe. Europe is where this competition is now. Yeah. The same Europe where they say, you know, Chinese EV companies should not come and sell in Europe. But China has bullied its way into the European market because it's producing cheaper, smarter, more efficient EVs, and it's also selling in Mexico, it's also selling in Russia. So this is the reality with regard to that. Now, I wanted to talk about copper. Copper seems to be doing well. Yep. Analysts are saying it's going to rise from about $10,000 per ton to $15,000 per ton because of this energy transition. Yes. And that lithium is also going to do well in the coming year because of this energy transition also. So copper provides an alternative. The other reason that is given is the expectation that Federal Reserves, the U.S. Federal Reserve, will cut rates. Yes. And that if you cut rates, the dollar becomes weaker, then of course people will invest more in Mr. Copper and also in you know, other metals. Yeah. So and we have lithium in Nigeria. We have lithium in Nigeria. We have in Cross River. Hey. What are we doing with
Dr. Abati, that is the question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.